Hello and welcome everybody to this Clarity Parents Chat. The topic we are going to discuss today is avoiding parenting burnout, how self-care can make you a better parent. We look forward to an engaging conversation with our guest speaker, Rick Edwards. This talk is a production of Clarity Child Guidance Center, a nonprofit treatment center solely dedicated to helping children 3 to 17 with their mental health. Clarity is located in the San Antonio Medical Center and provides inpatient and outpatient services to several thousand children every year. You can read more about the center at claritycgc.org and about children's mental health on our prevention and education website, oneinfiveminds.org. Before we start, I would like to recognize and thank all of veterans for their service and sacrifices on this Veterans Day. I'm sure we have military-connected family members on this call, and we know that they too serve when their loved ones are in active duty, when they move, when they're deployed, or return from deployment, or are in transition and other situations. So I encourage all of you to check out the extensive resources we offer on our military page at oneinfiveminds.org/military, which was built thanks to the help of USAA. Now, before we start, a few technical details. The webinar will end at 11:30, including a 10-minute Q&A at the end. This talk is recorded, but none of the names of the attendees will show in the recording to protect your privacy. That is also why we're not taking live questions. However, if you have questions for Rick, we invite you to post them in the chat space at any time during the talk. Of course, this event is purely educational and is by no means an attempt to provide counseling online. Rick Edwards is Clarity's Director of Inpatient Services, and he directs the acute, residential, and partial hospital programs. He has worked at Clarity CGC since 1976. That's 44 years, and he's, of course, one of our most senior employees, and we're very proud of that. He has provided individual and family therapy to countless children and teens, and his experience includes supervision of counselors and interns, as well as training psychiatric residents. Rick's clinical interests include perpetrator of abuse, self-injurious behaviors, family dynamics, and anxiety disorders. Rick also gave me permission to mention that he lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago, which meant a lot of self-care for him. And this is actually our topic today. So Rick, welcome.
Thanks very much, Gerard, and a shout out to all the veterans and the spouses of veterans. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Now we're going to start with an important question is, as a therapist, as someone who works with many families, what do you see causes the most stress to parents?
You know, right now, in particular, I think it's just the balance that every parent has with work and school demands for their kids, but also their own home life. And now with COVID, I think it's even more challenging to kind of balance all of those competing kind of demands. And oftentimes it's, as parents in particular, we want to see our kids succeed, and we certainly want to spare our kids kind of struggles. So it's, I think, a natural kind of response to kind of rush to take care of them, oftentimes without thinking about the needs that parents have to take care of themselves first.
And you speak about kids' struggles. You mean, explain that a little bit, how we as parents to protect our kids, right?
Sure. I think it's a natural kind of response. And kids will have the kind of struggles that they have just with siblings, with school demands, I think even with social media. And now with, again, with the coronavirus, it's that idea of being isolated and kind of disconnected from folks that had been a sense of support and connection for you in school and friendship. So that can add an additional strain. And as happy as it might be to sometimes be together as a family, it can also add a strain when you're there 24/7.
Right. And you talk about the change with COVID and the youth being at home and being, having an unstructured schedule. So this puts pressure on the parents, right? It's in sense
Absolutely. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. It may be kind of nice from the point of view of not having to have all the demands of being in school and kind of trying to juggle that schedule, but now you're confined to one area and under the same roof with the same folks all the time. And the demands of school and work haven't gone away. They've just become sometimes amplified. And when you're trying to do all of that under one roof at one time, can be quite a strain to not only the mom and dad, but also to the kids in the home.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we sometimes hear about burnout in a casual way, right? And really, I'd like to clarify what it is really, because it's like some of other conditions. We talk, he's paranoid or stuff. Those are real things, right? So
Sure,
what is burnout?
So burnout really kind of encompasses, and it's really on a continuum. So when I describe certain things, it may be that it's not as intense for some people as others. So there's a real continuum that has to do with how that you experience that. But there are really three kind of factors that you want to talk about. One of which is just that sense of emotional fatigue that a parent might experience, where it's almost like I'm running on empty. I don't have anything else to give emotionally to anybody else in the home. And there's, with that, the second part of that is that sense of, I almost begin to feel a decrease in my ability to be compassionate or to be empathetic with others under the same roof. And finally, the last part of it is that sense of what I do doesn't matter, that I really feel like whatever I'm working on, there's a sense of a lack of accomplishment, and that can lead to people feeling like I just want to withdraw and it won't make any difference anyway, which is just what parents oftentimes feel when they're at a stage of burnout. And again, it's on a kind of a continuum, and it may not be a constant sense of feeling, but when it becomes more and more evident, that's the time to really begin to think about, hey, I may not be in such good shape and really need to do some self-care.
Yeah, so you're saying everyone goes through phases where I don't have energy today, or I really don't feel like dealing with this child today.
Absolutely.
That happens, right? But you're talking about, okay, this is happening in an ongoing fashion, and you're talking about so first of all, no energy, no empathy. So like,
right.
Yeah, this. You get angry maybe, or you get very resistant to anything that happens. And then the worst part is it sounds like it's some hopelessness almost, right?
Sure.
Like
right.
I'm a failure.
No, it doesn't make any difference what I do because it's not going to make any matter. And so then oftentimes, maybe even worse than the display of the emotion of anger is just this withdrawal, that you just pull back altogether and aren't there for any kind of involvement. And it's so important because kids lack a couple of things that even us as parents have when we have those experiences. They don't have a lot of experience with those kinds of feelings. And they certainly may not have the language to put it into place other than that raw kind of gut emotion. And so when they see a parent kind of pulling back, they don't know if mom's going to come back or not, or if dad's going to ever feel better again. They just know they're not doing well now, and I'm not sure when that's going to get better.
That's really key. I think because for the parent, when the parent is in that state in an ongoing way, then the child could actually have some consequences in their
Absolutely.
psychological development. And just to go back, one more question about it, because I think that's really important. What does that look like when a parent withdraws? Can you describe different ways that
Sure.
happens?
So they may just find excuses not to follow a routine. They may find themselves isolating more, away from the family, not engaging with kids, not speaking with their spouse, maybe being more and more kind of self-absorbed in things that really don't make a huge difference. And they just shut down completely. Sleep might increase. Taking care of a daily routine for themselves or for their kids might slow down or stop altogether. And then they're not engaging with other folks, maybe even outside the immediate family circle.
That's really important. Now, would they also have other signs of depression, like maybe, changing appetite, changing sleep routine?
Sure.
Does that come
Sleep.
together as well?
Oftentimes, sleep is
Okay.
impacted, appetite. And it's funny, it's almost like they can run on a continuum where it's like, all I want to do is sleep, or I'm not sleeping at all because I just feel so bad, or all I want to do is eat, or no, I have no appetite at all.
Yeah.
The other piece in it, and it's the one that sometimes gets paid so much attention that you can miss the mark of how maybe depressed somebody might be, is that there's a marked sense of irritability, and that little things that would not have gotten you under your skin previously really will just be enough to kind of send you kind of over the edge. And people will pay attention to how angry it might look, when in effect, it really is that depression kind of just gnawing at you that you can't kind of feel like can get better.
And I think what's really important about that is for parents who are listening to this talk, or maybe spouses or relative, and know someone like that, is to realize that it's not the person's fault, right? This is really important, because you experience all this, and then on top of that, you feel guilty that you don't feel compassionate, you withdraw, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, that's that third part where it feels like it doesn't make any difference. And oftentimes what you can see is the kids themselves may be showing more irritability, they may be more withdrawn, and so that sometimes everybody can see, hey, looks like something's wrong with Johnny or Jamie. And it's like, okay, that may be true, but let's roll it back a little bit and check and make sure that mom and dad are doing okay. Because when kids feel like mom and dad are in a bad place, they too might feel like they're in a bad spot.
Yeah. No, that's really important. And that's what something we really look at Clarity is not just looking at the child, but the family system
as a whole. Exactly.
Now let's say I'm a working parent with three school-age children today. What should I focus on? How do I do the best I can in this context?
Yeah. And that, Gerard, that's a great question. I have a niece who is in that same position, three, school age, from age 4 up to 10 years old. And, we stay in real close contact, but you can just talking with her, you can see the daily struggles of how do I get these kids ready for online school and meet all their needs and keep a routine and hold down another job, on as well. And even though she has the support of her spouse, it's a challenge day in and day out. The biggest piece, I think there are kind of some important steps to be thinking about. And the first one is routine. And it really, having a routine sets a framework for you to be able to keep your family and yourself kind of organized. It's not the thing from the point of view of the schedule itself is most important, but it's a thing that adds a framework or fence around what you can do for your kids to have a daily time for breakfast, a daily time for school. But the second piece of that is every fence or every framework of a home has a door, and you want to have something that is set up so that kids and yourself have an outlet for some of that excess energy that can build up with just being confined to one space and trying to follow a routine. So having breaks from that routine during the day, and sometimes even maybe for a longer period of time in a day, to just give yourselves an opportunity to run off some of that excess energy. And it's not just physical exercise, it's release for some frustration for kids from being cooped up, being confined, and not having all the interaction that they might ordinarily have. And for mom and dad too, that having an opportunity to get out, take a walk, or just play outside for a bit, get some sunshine, can be a huge relief for everybody. The other part then is really working with the idea that we can get back to a routine, but we also have some other things that we do to take care of the daily rituals with kids as well. And remembering that each one of those kids, if you have 3 in particular, each one will have their own particular needs. And when arguments arise or when disagreements arise, it's helpful to have some time to be able to take a time out, even for adults. That's not a negative. That's just a time to say, let me change the direction of that this is going.
Excellent. So some structure, some routine, some time out, and or some ways to change rhythm, right? And transition to different activities. So those are very important. Now, I want to remind our audience here that they can ask any questions to us on the chat box. So if at any time, just put those questions in a chat box, and we'll go over them later in the program. Now, I'd like to now really ask you more about self-care, because also here, there might be some misunderstanding of what self-care truly is. So could you tell us a little bit what it is and what is not self-care, really?
Sure. So, you remember the old adage that they were talking about, if you're on an airplane and it started to take a nosedive and the oxygen mask would drop down. So everybody would say, put your mask on first before you would. Well, I think it's very similar from the point of view now, particularly with COVID. It's you use a mask, you wash your hands, you take your temps. It's not just the physical stuff that you're doing of taking a temperature. You're taking an emotional temperature for yourself to take your own reading. And a good way and a quick, simple way for a parent to take that kind of reading is to do just a real quick kind of body scan to say, am I holding some tension in my body? Is my jaw tight? Is my face frowning? Right? Are my shoulders tight? Anything, is my gut kind of feeling kind of tight? Ways to be able to read yourself well enough so that you can take a few moments to relax. Self-care is not withdrawing from interaction. It's giving yourself an opportunity to kind of refresh and take a better perspective about what's going on, not only for the kids that you might be working with, your children, but also for yourself. People misunderstand it, says self-care is being selfish. Self-care is really refueling your tank so that you can be available for the family that's going to need you. Self-care really says, I have as much need to be resilient, and it's a life lesson. It's a life lesson for kids to say, I can learn to bounce back, but in order to do that, I might need to take a break.
So the first step of self-care from what you're describing is really self-awareness, right? Is we're in the moment, we're in the action, we work, we take care of all kinds of things at home, and then we forget about how we are, right?
Exactly.
So you're talking about self-awareness. Now, taking this now, if you see that you're more in the, on the trend to, toward burnout, like what are some strategies that, and sometimes people may think about strategies, or they have coping mechanisms that maybe not as helpful as they hope, right? So it's kind of like, how do you know, what could be, how do you get help with that?
Sure. So I think if there are opportunities for you to have, and I'm not saying hours worth of any kind of activity, but even first thing in the morning, 10 good breaths. And it sounds so simple, but 10 good breaths, and just to calm yourself so that you can almost begin to set an intention for the day, not an expectation, but an intention about how you would like to be for that day. And if you can then do that even over a cup of coffee, and why, let me tell you why this is so important. We go into routines pretty easily, and we can feel like one day bleeds into another, and it feels like everything is the same day after day after day. It's when you take a few minutes to appreciate small little things that says the aroma from the cup of coffee, the taste of it, that it kind of lingers in your mouth. Just appreciating that moment can help you understand the value of just what that moment means, because there are going to be several moments during that day, and small things can mount up to really a larger appreciation for what happens in that day. And so often our inclination is to look at things that are not going well and overlook all the little things in life that really make life worthwhile. Mm-hmm. Self-care is learning to appreciate those small things and linking them together with a larger sense of gratitude and appreciation.
Yeah, we had one of our bloggers who's a mom of a child with a lot of mental health issues, Liza Long, and she wrote, just for me, getting up sometime, it's just the fact that I got up, I had to say thank you for that, because I was just able to get up, right? Yeah. It's amazing.
And it's that idea, Gerard, where I can set not so much of these lofty expectations about I'm going to be super mom today. It's I'm going to get up today and I'm going to be present when my kids are talking to me.
Yeah.
That's enough.
Yeah. I have a very good question. So someone who's really responding to what we're talking about, and finally talking about her inner isolating is being real. So she says, when I have been present but disengaged for a bit now, how do I begin to re-engage? How do I recreate a connected environment when it's almost non-existent today?
So I think you look for tiny little opportunities to motivate yourself to remember. And sometimes it's as simple as remembering what it was like when you were engaged. What were you doing? What was your child doing? What were some interests? And these really can be interests that you have that you're willing to share and rekindle with families. I often think of, particularly as we get closer to the holidays, and because things may be so difficult now around not being able to be with family, not having maybe the traditional stuff, is to remember there are small things that you can either recall from your own childhood, or even better, begin new ones. I'm thinking in particular about, for us, with my wife and daughter, every Christmas there was a new ornament to put on the tree with a year and our names on it. And we had things going back to 1978, and we would just decorate the entire tree. And even with my wife passing, we kept that tradition up. We had pet names. We had our daughter and my wife and I on with the year just to mark that. I think again too of my niece that I was talking about earlier. They have such a neat tradition. Every evening meal, they do what's called a thorn and rose. So everybody from the youngest up right through the mom and dad talk about one thing that they may have struggled with, their thorn for the day. And then they talk about the rose, which was one good thing that they had, that they shared. And then they just call on another member of the family. And I've been at meals with them, and they'll say, hey, it's your turn. You need to talk about your thorn and rose. And so it's just a way to pull you back into, let me think about and reflect on my day. What were the ups and what were the downs, and to be grateful.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. Another question was, one thing I found to be tricky is for the adults to find time and place to get away to recharge. There are many factors that make it difficult now that weren't there during the pandemic. Do you have any suggestion for that?
Sure. I think if you're fortunate enough, to have a spouse that can be and share those responsibilities with you, I think that's great. If there is extended family that maybe you can safely have in the home to watch the kids or give you an opportunity to just have a break. I find for me, the first thing in the morning when everybody else is asleep and quiet, I have that moment. And the same thing at night. The last thing I want to do is to kind of reflect on my day. I remember when my wife was still alive and we were every evening, the three of us would sit around and we made a gratitude journal and we wrote about what we were most thankful for. I still do that to this day. It's a 5-minute kind of recharge, but it puts me at a place where I can remember that I can rest and put my head on a pillow and be okay and get ready for the next day. Yeah. Sometimes it's not the length of time, it's the quality that you put into it.
That's powerful. And we tell young people especially to not be on their phone at night right before they sleep, right? This is the worst thing you can do, or right when you get up. Yeah, take that moment. If it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes, if you can do, but really at a moment that's for yourself, right?
Exactly. It's building in that sense of resiliency that you want your kids to have, that they can bounce back when life may not be going as well as you'd like. But it's also an opportunity for you to think about, what is it that I would like to be interested in, and explore some things, even if they're small things, to say, I can give that lesson to my kids too, to continue to be interested and curious about the world outside of my home, and pursue those when I have the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question is kind of related. It's a little bit unrelated, but it's a mom who's saying that her son is depressed, and how do I address it with him?
So I think you have to be as honest as you can. And the first step really is to respond with some empathy, to really say, I want, and I see what you're struggling with. I may not always understand what that is, but I want to be here for you. And I want to see if there's anything I can do to be of help. And that's just that initial kind of response. And to be honest about it, not to feel like you have to dismiss it or play it off, or to say, well, they're a teenager and they're not going to want to talk to mom and dad. They have their friends. Genuine, empathetic response of, I see what you're struggling with, and I want to see if there's anything I can do to help.
Yeah, that's very important. Another concern was the fact that parents have to make some big decisions today. For one is, for example, do I send my child to school, or do I keep him at home and do distance learning? And there are really important pros and cons, right? How can a parent make a decision and still feel, which is really difficult, right? And still feel okay?
Sure. And I don't know that there's always 100% kind of answer and solution that's going to work for in every case.
Right.
I think there's always a sense of, I'm going with my best intention to try and make the best decision at the moment with the information I have and the supports that I have available to me. It may not make everybody happy, and that does not mean that it's not a good decision. And if you have a child that's older, I think it's worthwhile to include them in that discussion and to pull them in to hear what their sides are. And it's not a final answer. You're going to come back to that question maybe a few times a week, maybe a few times a month, and maybe even the course of the school year. What's going to be the best answer for the moment? You reassess, you maybe fine-tune something, and then you move forward again with another decision.
Yeah, I think that really two big nuggets here is, one is being okay that we don't have the perfect answer to the problem, right? So I think absolutely. To be that moment, that time for self and kind of meditating time in the morning and at night is really important, because you connect with, like, okay, I'm okay even though I don't have all the answers, right?
Absolutely.
And that's really, really powerful. And the other part is if you're okay with yourself, you can have this dialogue and even maybe not, be open to what your child is thinking and have a conversation with them about it, which can really make the decision much better, right?
Sure. And I think sometimes it's helpful when things are more settled to have those kinds of discussion. In the heat of a conflict, in the heat of is the worst time to think that we're going to come up with really good answers. And it's helpful sometimes in the middle of one of those kind of heated, kind of escalating, is to take a break. And it's not meant in a negative way. It's a time to say, I can cool down. I can look at the course or the direction this is going. And if there's a way for me to take a turn and maybe turn it around and back off from it or ease off of it, then I can come back refreshed with maybe a different perspective of what might need to be a better solution. It's not striking when the iron is hot. It's when things are cooled off. Then we can talk about it. And sometimes we can make that mistake of, if I start bringing this up, everybody's going to get upset again. No, they're in a better frame of mind and calmer. Now you've got a bunch of rational minds that can come up with an answer.
And I've used with my kids the old, pros and cons, right? Let's just take a piece of paper and let's write what are the pros of doing this, what are the cons of doing that, and it's like it's not about us anymore. It's about we're all trying to figure this out together, right?
Exactly.
That's really important. Another question I have here is teen is not understanding why we have to be quarantined for 2 weeks with a father having COVID. How do we help that teen?
So again, I think you can look at it from particularly a teamwork, and I like that concept that we all will have a role in this. We will all have a part to play in this, and when a team works, it's not just one person having to do it all. It's everybody can share some role in this, from the youngest to the oldest in the home, to say there is something we can do to pull this together. And this is not permanent. This is not forever. And we can work through with that to see an endpoint. And when we get there, we can celebrate and say we not only that we got through it, but the whole family, the whole team was able to do it. So in basketball, you don't see one person holding the ball and trying to make all the points. We share that. We have a plan. And even if the plan doesn't always work, we have something to operate from that says, if things start to go wrong, we can come back and fine tune this again.
And we're actually out of time, but there are so many good questions. I'd like to ask a couple more.
Sure.
And because I think this is really important. So here's a parent who has a child who has a mental illness, and they're trying to create a routine, but they get a lot of pushback from the child. And so how, it actually creates stress trying to do a routine.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for that parent?
So depending on that child's ability to be able to kind of put into words about what it is, I always think it's helpful to start with that perspective of some empathy. I see this as a struggle. This is difficult for us to come up with, and it's a strain on you, and it looks like it's a strain on the rest of the family. But here's the deal. We have to have some way of managing the day-to-day kind of things in the home. I want to know from you what it is you feel like you need in order for me to make that happen. It doesn't mean that we're going to do everything that the child wants, but it is a way to begin to get some collaboration and to build on that. And it's not one conversation. We're going to have this conversation maybe a few times before we get to a point where we're really making it work. And we're going to continue to fine tune, and you make a commitment to that. We're going to continue to try and be as empathetic as we can, to see where we can compromise, but we also want you to do your part in this as well. And we won't give up on the notion that we can improve this.
I have a couple more questions. I want to ask this one. It's so here's a situation with a parent who has is raising a child for 10 years with severe mental health issues. After seeing that, she's basically, it sounds like she's in a state of burnout. Is there really an end or a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes, yeah, there is. And I'm not saying this to be facetious. It's not a train, but there is a sense of hope. But I think you build that by beginning to do that self-care, that you begin to take some time for yourself to reassess just what really is important to you. And if you can only link onto one thing that's important when it comes to working with your son or daughter and holding a routine, that's what you hold on to. And you take small steps. We're not talking about huge leaps here. We're taking small steps towards making that improvement. And each day we can reflect on it. What's my intent today? My intent today is to try and be more cooperative, not to lose my temper, but to take a break if I find myself getting short with my son or daughter. My effort then at the end of the day is, how did I do? Not to be hard on yourself, but to reward yourself when you catch yourself doing the things that you really intend to do. And there is always hope.
Yeah, and I think if you feel hopeless, this is really important to seek help, right? I mean, it's,
Absolutely.
yeah, there is help that, talking to someone who can be supportive and guide you through this process, because sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's really hard to see
That's
and
right.
even have the energy to do that step.
And
So we encourage.
there is nothing shameful about the fact when you reach out to somebody for help.
Yeah. So we have. I don't have time to go to get to more questions, but I really thank you, Rick, for
Hey, you're very welcome.
this time with
this
you.
was very enjoyable.
It was really helpful, I think, and really helpful to parents. Thank you for all the parents who were here today. We look forward to having you again, parents, for our next week's webinar, which will be with Andrea Tristan, who is a therapist at Clarity. And she will talk about, it's a related topic with self-care, related to self-care, but it's really how can a couple, parent, spouses can help each other instead of, because when you have a challenges with children who, especially children who have big difficulties, it can actually cause some stress on the relationship. And so we want to talk about that next week, and that will be our webinar next week. So thank you again, everyone, for being here today, and we will see you then.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Rick.